Hey, we'll take T.O. and Poplar Bluff. But
there we go.
Hey, Jeff, I've got actually two questions for Jeff, and this deals with Kansas State. The money that they spent on their NIL and their roster, it hasn't panned out the way they wanted to. And this leads to my second question. Too many coaches in college basketball right now are blaming not having the NIL money for losses or not having the season that they want. Do you think this could be a good example to those coaches that say, hey, listen, even if you did have the NIL money that you want, sometimes it just doesn't work out the way you want it? And also, will we finally stop paying players that haven't produced and are kind of a little bit unproven?
All right, so that's a triple barrel question from Tyler, so we know. So you're taught only to ask one question, Tyler. You've now hit me with three. I'm old. There's no way I can remember all three of them. All right, so you're gonna have to
seasoned, Jeff. You're seasoned, man. Stop calling
I started to write him down. As Tyler said him, I started to write him down so I could remember. All right, so one of them is, yes, I think now coaches are looking at this and saying Kansas State, Arkansas, Indiana, three schools have spent a ton of money that it really you haven't gotten your return on investment. You don't need necessarily $5 million. You need to be smart because Kansas State clearly overspent on some Ugonna and Yensu, for instance. I mean, he got paid a ton of money and he doesn't even really play. I know people will slander Coleman Hawkins. That's my guy, so I'm not going to really allow that. But yeah, he should be doing more. He should be doing more than he's done, and winning is ultimately the biggest thing. So I think the biggest key is evaluating these guys and the fit with your team as well. So many teams overpaid for bigs, right? They did. I mean, I was watching Carolina tonight. And Carolina struck out in some guys, right? They struck out on Big Cliff. Yeah. Well, they underpaid because they weren't going to overpay for Big Cliff, and then they missed out on Jonas Adu, and then you're at Van Allen Lubin, who they didn't underpay for him, trust me, but that's who they ended up with. So I think a lot of it is just getting the right guys that fit, like Elijah Martin. I mean, talk about the fit for Florida. And getting a guy like that, I mean, like I could have told you, and a bunch of coaches called me on him, and I was like, man, this dude's all about winning. He's just in the wrong situation last year with a bunch of guys that, frankly, a lot came to him quick at FAU, and they didn't know how to handle it. And it was Nellie Davis's show, so I think a lot of other guys didn't know how to deal with that. But, yeah, Tyler, I think, listen, you hope there's a market correct here a little bit, but you're looking at it and you're saying A.J. DeBonsa, the number one player in the country, arguably. I think Darren Peterson's in that equation, and so is Boozer. Probably is going to get $5 million plus, $6 million, $7 million at the end of the day to go to BYU. He has done zero. He is talented as hell. He is super talented. He could be the number one overall pick, but that is a ton of money to give to a kid who has not played one game in college. I'd much rather give it to a proven guy that has produced at the college level, because I don't know, number one, if AJ is going to do it in college, despite his oozing of talent. And then it's, do you have enough money to surround him with the right players that they can win? Or it's, yeah, correct. Exactly. Right. Rutgers is two great players, talented, and they don't have enough around those guys that they're probably going to be an NIT team.
Yeah. Here's the thing that bothers me a little bit. It's the guys that, like Tyler referenced, they haven't proven anything. Like they haven't won big games. They haven't been a part of big wins, and they're getting paid massive amounts of dollars. And that's why I'm not taking away from those guys getting paid, because good for them. I'm never going to look at another man's pockets. However, what I am intrigued by is like how good some of the guys have been in other situations, not Kansas State, but like Kentucky. Mark Pope knocked it out of the park. I thought Pat Kelsey, before all these injuries, I thought he knocked it out of the park. You look at all these different guys, it's such a puzzle piece thing. And I loved what you said. I feel like there's been some that have spent inordinate amounts of money on the best talent they could grab, and they're just like, well, we'll figure it out when we get here, as opposed to, I guess a little, not pre-planning is not the right word, but looking forward into being like, well, this guy fits with this guy because of this, or I could use this guy in this system here because of this. Like, that's where it gets so tricky in the transfer portal when you're looking at how much money you're going to pay each person. Like, that's where it gets tricky. But you look at some of these rosters that have done well, a lot of these guys are coming from places where they've already won. That's number one. And they were significant contributors. So that's where the difference is. Like, Coleman Hawkins was great in spurts for Illinois. What's the kid's name from Kentucky? Help me out with the pronunciation.
Ugana and Yensu.
Yeah, I mean, what did he ever do? Nothing.
He did.
So like that's kind of where I'm at with this. So like, you have to find guys that fit your system and what you want to do, and you can't overpay, because like this NIL stuff, like, they're finding ways to get these tax write-offs. They're not all tax write-offs. Like, there's ways around it. Of course, there's ways around everything. But like, at the same time, like, that money's not just coming forever. Guys are going to get pissed paying $750,000 for a dude averaging 2 points.
And they don't know these guys like they knew Carolina, Florida recruited Tyler for 3 years. They knew you. Mm-hmm. They knew your parents. They knew your brother. Yeah, they knew everything about you. But now a kid goes in the portal and you've missed out on maybe a couple other kids. And maybe Carolina's a good example. I don't know. But like, they miss out on a couple bigs, and then they're at Van Allen Lubin, and you don't know how much they really know about Van Allen Lubin, right? Like, and again, I'm not saying Van Allen, he might be a great kid. I don't know him, and he probably is a high character kid. But I'm just using him as an example of, if you strike out on a couple of guys, you're scrambling, you haven't done your due diligence, you might make a call to another staff member on that team. But a lot of those guys, too, if you don't know them well, they're not going to tell you the truth on everything. They're not going to tell you that if a kid is a turd, that he's actually a turd.
Yeah. And then another thing, too, is like, a lot of those kids that you're kind of recruiting on the second time, sometimes you're not recruiting them on the second time because they weren't even on your radar, because a lot of times, they're Big West, or they're going, no shot at the Missouri Valley, but you get what I'm saying here, Cam. Like, Missouri Valley kids, you're not doubling down. Like, the SEC schools aren't looking at that kid, and he might be playing on an off-circuit team. And then he goes there and he's terrific. So they have no background information. Sometimes when they go from Power 5 to Power 5, and I call it Power 5 because Big East is part of this Power Conference thing. Power 5 to Power 5, there's a little bit more familiarity. But at the same time, like, they're scratching and clawing, trying to get the best players, and there's not enough homework being done sometimes.